Awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. If a few people decide to join us later on, they won't miss much. I'm gonna introduce myself. I am Riley Alvarez. I work at the Marine Education Center as one of the marine educators. I graduated from South Alabama with a marine biology degree and headed over this way when I got a job in Ocean Springs. With me today, I have Lacey. So she's one of the other educators, and she's going to be helping me out, making sure that I don't mess up or anything like that, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. So you won't see my face, but maybe every now and then you'll hear my voice. So that's cool. But yeah, me and Riley started teaching at the MEC at the same time. So we've been through this ride together. And I got my degree in marine biology from Southern Miss. So I've been a part of Southern Miss for a really long time. So I'm really happy to be able to do this for you guys.
Awesome. So today we're going to be teaching about birds. So we're going to learn about all the bird characteristics, what they do in the environment, and then we're also going to talk about birds that you would find in the South, so close to the ocean as well as marshy bayou areas. So first thing I'm going to do is share my screen with y'all. Awesome. So this PowerPoint was made by Jesse James, one of the first educators we had over in this area. She's worked at the MEC for around 6 years. So she's taught me and Lacey a lot of things, just how things run around this area. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to have a poll question. So just answer the best you can. It doesn't have to be a right or wrong answer. You know, we're here to learn, so don't be scared to answer something that you don't know. But the first one we're going to ask is, what is your favorite type of bird? This is an easy one. It can be any of these choices. My personal favorite would have to be either the pelican, because they eat fish all day long. I'd rather eat fish than, you know, small little rodents any day. And I've always found the hummingbirds really fascinating. It's crazy how they can move in one spot or stay in one spot. They'll be flapping their wings so fast. They're kind of like helicopters, how they can like hover in one little spot. So I've always found hummingbirds really fascinating.
We're just waiting on a few more people to vote. I'll probably give you guys 10 more seconds.
Yeah, so just go ahead and pick whatever you think is your favorite bird. Awesome. So we have a few people that chose pelican, hummingbirds, peacocks, and swans. That's interesting. Swans are cool. A fun fact with peacocks is a male peacock is a peacock, a female peacock is a peahen, and a baby peacock is a peachick. So that's really interesting. Those three names that I did not know. I recently found that out. Another cool fact with peacocks is that the males, so the boys, are the ones with the really cool feathers that are like purple, green, blue, yellow, those really cool, vibrant feathers. So those are the males, and the females will have grayish, brownish, more dull feathers. So I thought all peacocks had those really cool feathers, but the reason why males have it is so they can impress the ladies and attract them. It's kind of like guys wearing a nice suit to go to dinner, you know, try to impress the ladies. So yeah, that's really interesting with peacocks. Okay, so now we're gonna get started with this presentation. Let's see. So what makes a bird a bird? So these 5 characteristics classify organisms into birds. So reptiles have a few of these characteristics, but they don't have all of them. So they're not classified as birds. Same with mammals, fish, amphibians, all those. So we're going to get started with this. This is vertebrates. So vertebrates means that they have backbones. That's something that all our birds have in common. Another characteristic is that they breathe air using lungs. So their lungs are a little bit more different than ours. Lacey will get into that a little bit in our 11 o'clock session. So make sure to tune into that later today, 11 o'clock session, where she's going to go over a few more things and show you all really cool activities. Next thing is that the feathers are made of keratin. So for those who don't know what keratin is, that's basically what your nails, and what your hair is made out of. So your hair and nails is really, it's not as strong as bone and it's not as heavy as bone. So that's why they use it in their feathers, so that way they stay light and that way they can fly a little bit easier, as well as their hollow bones. So their hollow bones is the reason why the majority of birds can fly, because they're so light. Again, Lacey will show you all a really cool picture with their lungs and their bones later at 11 o'clock, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So these hollow bones, basically, instead of it being solid in the middle, it kind of has a lot of air chambers. So it's really easy to break. That's why it's not good for you to feed chicken wings or chicken bones to your dogs, because they can break easily and then they can be really sharp on the inside. So the last thing we're gonna talk about is that they're endothermic. Endothermic. So that's just a fancy scientific word for warm-blooded. Exothermic would be cold-blooded. So endo means inside, thermic means temperature, so inside temperature. Then exothermic, exo meaning outside, thermic meaning temperature. So with endothermic or warm-blooded creatures, they can regulate the inside temperature inside of their body. So we're warm-blooded creatures, all mammals are. And basically our inside temperature for humans stays at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's something that we all have in common, 98 degrees Fahrenheit inside of our body. Whether you're 1 year old, 80 years old, doesn't matter where you come from in the world, that's something that we're all gonna have in common. Versus our cold-blooded temperatures, or cold-blooded animals, these guys have to depend on the temperature around them. So if my room, inside my room, it's 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the inside temperature of a cold-blooded creature would be 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So if they're out in the desert or a really hot Mississippi day where it can get to 90, 100 degrees, the inside temperature of those reptiles or cold-blooded creatures is going to be 90 to 100 degrees. And the same thing happens when it gets really cold. So if it drops down to 30 degrees or it's really, really cold, their inside temperature will get really cold as well. And they'll start to slow down a little bit too. So you can see that in lots of, like frogs, lizards, snakes, they'll start to slow down because the inside temperature gets so cold. So whenever I was growing up, I thought the difference between warm-blooded and cold-blooded was that their blood was warm and the blood was cold. So now you know what the difference is. Okay, so why are birds important? So birds serve many important roles within the ecosystem. They are both prey and predators in the food web. They balance prey populations and remove detritus. So let's backtrack a little bit. So prey is basically they're hunted by the predators. So the predators are going to be trying to eat the prey. Next thing we're going to talk about is detritus. So detritus is just basically just decaying matter, like leaves that fall off of trees, twigs, dead grass, all those things that you would find on the forest floor or even sometimes in the ocean. So when you have lots of like gunky stuff in your marshy areas, that's mainly because there's not a lot of water flowing and it kind of just builds up in those areas. So you'd see lots of detritus in bayous and swamps and stuff like that. So if we had too many preys, so we had lots of little organisms like your hummingbirds and blue jays and cardinals and all these organisms that aren't necessarily predators, they would consume all the bugs and all the fruits, so berries, all your vegetables, and all those things, because we wouldn't have enough predators to eat on those prey. So we have to make sure that the whole food web is balanced out. If we had too many predators, then they would eat all the prey, and then we would have too many insects, and we would have too many, I guess having a lot of fruit and vegetables doesn't sound too bad, but we would have a lot of vegetation as well. So it's really interesting that we always have to balance the food web, and nature does this by itself, which is really interesting. Humans have little interference with this. Before we started colonizing and all that, the food web would kind of balance itself out, which is super interesting. So our birds will eat insects, they'll eat small fish, they'll eat decaying matter, other bird species, so big birds might eat smaller birds, snakes. So it's really cool how birds can actually fight off snakes. Berries, nuts, and fruits. So that's what you'll see in the bottom left image down here is a bird eating some fruits. Next role that they have is that they spread these fruits and seeds to new areas. So basically they consume the berries and then they digest it and they drop it in different places. So they eat and then they fly somewhere else and then drop it off in another area, and then a tree grows. So that's really cool how that happens. That happened a lot in the Hawaiian Islands. So if you don't know, Hawaiian Islands were formed by volcanoes, and you don't get trees and plants from volcano matter. It's hot molten rock. But once that rock cooled down, birds and other organisms would fly from different areas and they would deposit these seeds into in the Hawaiian Islands, and that's how it flourished and brought so many different types of plants, and so many different birds and other organisms started to flock to that area. All right, so now we're going to ask you another poll question. So this is our second poll question. You can answer it as best as you can. So, what is the largest bird? You don't have to know this question. Just do your best guess. So while we're waiting for a few more people to answer, if you have any questions throughout my presentation, feel free to ask me, whether it's related to the lesson that we have or just anything marine biology related that you were kind of wondering or interested in. I see that there's a few questions in the question and answer box. I'll get to those at the end of the presentation, so that way, we don't backtrack and slow down and all those things. So I will definitely get to your question. I see right now we have one unanswered question, but I'll get back to that shortly. Awesome. So we have eagles, ostriches, and emus. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. So the correct answer is ostriches. Ostriches are the largest bird in the world. They're so large that they actually can't fly, so they're really, really heavy. So it's kind of, kind of sad that this bird can't fly, but they developed another way. Since they can't fly, they're like, okay, well, over time they have to develop something so they, they can hunt and they can move around and all those things. So ostriches are surprisingly really, really fast. Humans can't outrun ostriches. It'd be really, really hard to. They actually have ostrich races in parts of Africa. Whenever I went to South Africa, I got to witness this, and you can actually get on an ostrich and ride around a track, which is the craziest thing. Emus are found in Australia, New Zealand area. So these birds also cannot fly, but they're actually really small. And it kind of looks like they don't have any wings. And then our eagle, of course, is really, really large. And you can definitely spot it a mile away, but it's not the largest bird in the world. Another cool thing with ostriches is that their eggs are so big. They're probably the size of my head. And this egg can actually feed a whole family for breakfast. And surprisingly, I've heard it tastes really good. I've never tried it myself, but I've heard it tastes really good. Okay, so roles that birds play. So plant mutualism. So birds help plants thrive and survive. So let's talk about that real quick. So mutualism is a relationship that two organisms have in the wild. So they can be plant and animal, they can be microorganism and plants, they can be, it's just any organism that has an interaction with another organism. So they can have a positive interaction or positive relationship, or they can have a negative relationship. So, or in between. So an example of a negative relationship would be a parasite. So if your dogs or cats have ever had fleas or ticks, that would be an example of a negative relationship, because your dog or cat is just living life, but he's getting hurt, and he's getting his blood drawn out of him by these ticks or fleas, which they're happy. Ticks or fleas, that's their food source. They're living life, but they're actually hurting your dog and cat. So that'd be an example of a negative relationship. Example of a positive relationship would be when two organisms help each other out. So birds will live on trees, and trees will provide protection, they'll provide food, provide a place to, put your nest and, hang around. That's why you see birds on trees all the time. And in return, birds will, eat little insects coming on the tree. So if there's termites or little ants or, other organisms that are harming the tree, then the birds will, help the tree out, because they don't want their house or their home to be invaded or destroyed or any of those things. Another example would be hummingbirds pollinate flowers. So whenever hummingbirds are eating, they're consuming food, so hummingbirds are happy. And at the same time, all that pollen from the flowers that they're consuming gets stuck on their feathers. And eventually, whenever they go from flower to flower, they spread that pollen and then make more flowers in return. So it's really cool how these organisms always help each other out. Next thing we're talking about is predators. So birds of prey, excuse me, birds of prey, that's a commonly used term. generally have talons. So they'll have like really sharp claws or talons. That's why whenever people are handling hawks or birds in general, they have a really thick leather glove, and you'll see like the bird will like land here with its talons, and then eventually fly off, and then they'll fly back to that glove. If you didn't have that glove, you'd probably get your skin torn into, and that's no fun. They're really, really sharp. And the reason for that is because predators are going to be hunting prey, so they have to have a weapon of some sort. So their talons is a very useful weapon against snakes, against small mice, moles, even other birds. They have great eyesight, so they can spot things from really, really far distances. That's why they can be up in the sky super far away, and they can spot the smallest little rodent, smallest little mouse under all the trees and all those things. So their eyesight is really, really great. And they have a carnivorous diet. So you won't typically see a bald eagle munching on an apple. So that's just something that you won't really see. A bald eagle will be eating smaller prey, like I mentioned before, small mice and things like that. You won't see predators eating berries and things like that. I think that would be like a last resort type thing if there's absolutely no food. And they have short and powerful beaks. So they have really, really sharp beaks. So you never want to get bit by a bird. It's no fun. It's really, really sharp. And the reason why they have these sharp and powerful beaks is so that they can eat meat. So humans use a fork and a knife, but out in the wild, our birds don't have these utensils to eat meat. So they have to have really strong beaks for that. Examples of predators would be raptors, owls, falcons, eagles, storks, gulls, cranes, and herons. You'll find those all over the marshy areas or even the beaches. And penguins. So let's backtrack a little bit. So owls, you wouldn't really think of them as predators, but they actually eat lots of meat. So they eat mice, they eat shrews, they eat really tiny birds, they eat just anything that has meat, which is really interesting because you don't really think about owls being a predator because they look so peaceful besides the bright eyes or the wide eyes. And penguins, so you won't really think about penguins as predators, but their diet mainly consists of fish. So they're always hunting fish. And even though these guys can't fly, they're excellent swimmers. So our penguins and ostriches have developed other ways to hunt and to move around since they can't fly. Then our last thing we're going to talk about here is that we have scavengers and decomposers. So examples of this would be vultures and condors. They can easily eat meat. They typically have bald heads, and they have strong and long talons. So these guys are basically going to be the birds that you see on the side of the road, eating on animals that are already dead. So these scavengers and decomposers, you won't really see them hunting. Again, that's like a last resort type thing. You won't see them hunting. You'll just wait until animals basically die off from a disease, or another animal didn't finish the whole meal, or just anything like that, and then eventually they'll take advantage of that and they'll eat whatever's left over. Okay. So in this slide we have lots of different types of birds and beaks. So birds have developed different beaks for different things. So we have birds that develop beaks to break nuts. We have birds that develop beaks to eat nectar from plants. Other birds that develop beaks to eat meat. So we have lots of different types of beaks here. And basically, what would happen is that birds living in one area, so you lived on the coast, let's say Ocean Springs, Biloxi, Pascagoula, they eventually developed beaks so that they can fish because there's so much fish out in the ocean and there's an endless supply of food that eventually their beaks would kind of adapt to these certain areas. If you had beaks, if you had birds that lived in forests where there was lots of fruits and lots of vegetation, you would have beaks that would basically be able to tear into that fruit, tear into those veggies, and be able to consume that easier. So we're going to go through this list. We're not going to get too detailed into each type of beak, but we're just going to go and talk about a little bit about each one. So we have generalist, insect catching, and I'm going to go down the row here. We have surface skimming, mud probing. That one's really interesting. Grain eating, coniferous seed eating, probing, filter feeding, nectar feeding, fruit eating. So that's a really cool. I love toucans. They have really cool feather patterns as well as a really bright beak. We have aerial fishing, pursuit fishing, chiseling. So that's going to be your typically your woodpeckers. Dip netting, scavenging, and raptorial. So now we're going to ask y'all one more poll question. Just answer this as best as you can. So you can move the little poll questions to the side and look at each beak and think of which one would be the best to catch fish based on the answers we have here right in front of you. Just answer this as best as you can. You're not getting graded, so awesome. So we have dip netting as the majority voted. So you guys are right. Out of all of these answer choices, dip netting is going to be the best for catching fish. So if we look at the dip netting bird, so the last row, the second one from the left, that's going to be your pelican. So pelicans have really interesting beaks. The top is really skinny and the bottom is super wide, and it actually kind of expands to fill up with all the water and all the fish that it's catching. So it'll go across the surface of the water and sometimes actually shoot into the water and scoop up as much of that water as they can, hopefully catching fish at the same time, and eventually they'll swallow it. So it's kind of like having an actual net or a dip net, which is really cool. All right, so now we're going to move on to brown pelicans. So now that we're talking about their beaks, we're going to talk a little bit about the brown pelican. So the brown pelican is found all over the coast. You'll see it anywhere from Louisiana to Florida, and even some other parts. These guys are Really large. So if you've ever seen one drying its wings, usually they'll be in like on a dock or a pier, and they'll just have their wings kind of stretched out so they can dry, and and that way they're not as heavy with all the water that they caught whenever they were fishing. So they're really large. They are really dark, so they're brownish, grayish, blackish birds, but they have a yellow face and an orange sort of beak. So it's like a yellow orange pattern in the face. Young birds have pale breast feathers. You'll often see them, spreading their wings to dry out. And these guys will eat fish as well as small crustaceans. So for those who don't know what crustaceans are, that's basically little shrimps and little crabs. Any animal that has an exoskeleton in the water is typically a crustacean. We are going to talk about crustaceans on Wednesday. So Lacey's going to talk all about arthropods on Wednesday. So you'll learn a little bit more about that. And these guys will live near rivers, lakes, marshes, and coastlines. So they're really common. You can't miss them. If you ever go to the beach down in Biloxi, Ocean Springs, you can't miss them. Next birds we're going to talk about is the great blue heron. So just by looking at this bird, you can see that it has really tall legs, and its feathers are actually not in the water. So that's something that they've adapted over time, is that these guys are going to be found basically in your marshy areas, bayou areas, and they'll have long legs because usually the bayou areas, the water is really shallow. So they have these long legs so that way they can stand and walk over the surface, or not the surface of the water, but on in the water and still be able to keep their feathers dry, and they can have an overhead view of the water so they can do fishing, so they can spot things from above the water. These guys are really large and they have blue grayish feathers. So this is a really good example, a really good image where the body of, or the wings of this bird are like grayish blue. So it has like a bluish tint to it, which is awesome. I love birds with lots of colors. And then they have a yellowish beak. These guys eat frogs, they eat snakes, small mammals, and fish. So those are all things, again, that you'll find in your marshy areas. These guys both live in fresh and saltwater marshes. So typically, your bayous or your marshy areas closer to the Gulf of Mexico are going to be full of brackish water. So for those who don't know what brackish water, that's a mixture of salt and fresh water. So salt coming from the Gulf of Mexico and fresh coming from the rivers up in North Mississippi, North Alabama, and North Louisiana. Whenever they meet, they make brackish water. Next guy we're going to talk about is the snowy egret. So these guys are super cool looking. They kind of just look like a giant little cloud or a giant little fluff ball. Again, these guys have these long legs so that way they can walk into the water and actually catch fish that way. They can see, they can kind of look down, and their legs are so skinny that, the fish won't really notice it. They'll just think it's like a little, stick in the water or something like that. So they won't notice these guys hovering over them. They are smaller, so they are smaller than the heron, and they have black beaks as well as black legs, and they'll have yellowish face closer to the eyes, as well as yellowish feet. These guys will eat crustaceans. So again, that's like your shrimps and organisms like small little crabs, things like that, as well as fish. So this picture right here, you can actually see this snowy egret eating a little fish. And these guys will be found in salt and freshwater marshes, as well as the coasts. Next guy we're going to talk about is the osprey. So this bird is really, really cool. One of my favorite birds down here. You'll see them all over the coast. So let's talk about this guy. So first of all, he is a large eagle-like raptor. So it's basically a mini version of a bald eagle. And it's going to be a lot smaller than the bald eagle too. But still really large. These guys are predators. So they are typically going to be eating large and small fish, depending on what they can get their beaks on. So these guys will actually build a nest. So if you can see on this image on the right, they have nests made out of sticks and twigs and really large items. And they'll actually place this nest on dead trees. So there's two reasons why they would place it on dead trees. One, so they can have a clear view of everything around them. So they can spot, more fish. They can see what the weather's like. They can, see if there's any threats or anything like that. And as well as dead trees will have less branches and they'll have less leaves. So if you're looking down, you can see if a snake or a raccoon or another creature is trying to climb up to eat its eggs. So whenever birds lay eggs, the eggs are really, really vulnerable. So these guys developed a way so that way they can be alert 100% of the time and make sure that nothing would be messing with their eggs. So another cool thing is one time we were on a boat on PTB, so it's a small little boat, and we were leaving the Davis Bayou going into the Gulf, and we actually saw two ospreys fighting off a bald eagle, and they were all like swooping around and hitting each other, and it was the craziest thing. And believe it or not, that one eagle beat off two ospreys. It kind of just, told them to back off, and the ospreys left them alone. So they must have been fighting for either food, so they might have seen the bald eagle with a fish or something like that, or they might have been fighting for territory. So the osprey was kind of, saw this bald eagle being close to its nest and was like, hey, you might want to back off. So it was really cool. That's not something you see every day. Next thing we have is a red-tailed hawk. So these guys are going to be common all over, the South. You'll find them all over North America as well. This is just a very common hawk. This is one of the largest hawks in North America, and it is, it eats mammals, reptiles, and other small birds. And these guys live near mountains, forests, deserts, open grasslands, and marshes. So like I said, it's just all over the US. You can find them anywhere. It's the most common, hawk. So if you're ever driving down the highway going up north and you see a large bird, that's probably going to be your red-tailed hawk. Lacey, do you want to tell them what happened to your poor dog? I think it's a really interesting story because it's not something that you hear of every day.
No, it's not. So I have a very small dog. Her name is Reese, like Reese's Cups. And a long time ago, probably like 3 or 4 years ago, I was not home. I was living down here. And I got a call from my parents saying that something had happened to her. They weren't sure. Come to find out, we assumed, more than likely, because we've always had lots of red-tailed hawks around our house because we live in the middle of the woods. We assumed that a red-tailed hawk scooped down and tried to grab Reese, my little dog, and because she had 2 holes on each side of her body. And we think that the hawk tried to pick her up and take her away, but Reese is very smart, so she turned around and bit the hawk on the leg, and then the hawk let her go. So be careful of your small domestic animals and all your pets because they are on red-tailed hawks' radars.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a really, it's not a story you hear of every day. Okay, so next bird we're going to talk about is the laughing gull. So these birds are going to be, so now we're getting into the smaller birds. These are going to be a lot smaller. You'll find them all over the coast, as well as marshes. They have really distinct feather patterns, so their body's going to be all white, and then they'll have like grayish, blackish wings, or like their backside. And then they're also going to have a dark gray or black face and reddish beaks, as well as those really long legs. Again, that's just easier for them, these guys, to hunt on the coastline. So these guys have a really distinct laugh or a really distinct bird call. You'll hear them all the time whenever you're on the coast. I'm not going to imitate the sound. If you want to look it up later, you can. But they have a really distinct way of communicating. Another thing with these guys, don't feed them, because once you feed them, they'll know you have food, and they'll just keep on bothering you, and they'll call their friends with that laughing cry or that laughing call. And eventually you'll have a bunch of these guys swarming you, and if you feed them, then it's going to come out the other end, and you're going to get that on you. So just don't feed these guys for your own safety. So this bird is really interesting as well. It has a really cool and unique beak, again, so it was adapted to hunt. So these guys are called the black skimmer. They have large black and white seabirds with long wings, and they have a black and red bill and orange/red legs. So these guys are going to eat small fish, and what they'll do is kind of like the same thing as a pelican. So they'll skim on the surface of the water, and they'll scoop up as much water as they can, trying to catch fish. So the bottom part of their beak doesn't expand like pelicans, but it still has the same function. So they'll be hunting for small fish using the bottom part of their beak. You'll see these guys as well as the laughing gulls. If you ever go to Ship Island, you'll see lots of these guys just hanging around because there's lots of fish over that way. Okay, awesome. So we are finished with my lesson. I see that we have a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and check those out real quick. Okay, so we're going to start with the first question. Are their feathers bendable, and do they need their feathers to bend and flex? So feathers are bendable. Right here, I have an example of a blue jay feather. Oh, that's cool. It's kind of like invisible. So you can see it's kind of blue on the side right here. But again, they are bendable because remember, they're made from keratin or hair. So your hair is bendable. You know, if you ever messed around with your hair, combed it, as well as your nails. So your nails can bend. So they're made from the same material, so they can bend. So they're a lot more agile, a lot more flexible than other organisms. We can't really bend if it wasn't for our joints, but if you tried to bend your arm, you could not, or like this part right here, your forearm, you wouldn't be able to. So that's a really good question. Next question we're gonna ask is approximately how many birds are extinct? So I did not know the question of this or the answer to this, so I looked it up, and it says that from the 1500s, over 190 bird species have become extinct. So almost 200 species of birds have been extinct in the last 500 years. So that's an excellent question. Next question we're going to talk about is what type of beak is the Mississippi sandhill crane? I honestly don't know the answer to that. I will look into that, and I will just do a little research. I'm really not a bird expert. I've been studying them just for a little bit over a year. So I'm not a bird expert. I'm more of on the marine biology side, but I will look into that. That's an excellent question. I would assume they have the same type of beak as your herons and your snow egrets. Just easy to fish with. You find cranes fishing or hunting for small organisms in water. So I would assume that they have the same type of beaks as your herons and snow egrets. Next question. So what is the difference between an egret and a crane? So that's a good question. So their feather patterns are going to be different. They're going to be, I think, let's look this up real quick. So give me 1 second to answer this question. You guys are asking excellent questions. I love to hear these questions, as well as I learn a little bit from y'all. I'm always getting questions. I'm always getting questions from kids at the MEC, and it kind of like leaves me thinking, like, you know what? I've never actually really thought about that. And I go home where I talk to the other educators, because they're really well known in different areas and different subjects, and we kind of just learn from each other, and we talk about all these things. So I love getting questions from y'all. Even if I don't know it, I learn a little bit from it. So apparently herons curve their necks into an S shape when they're flying, and cranes stick their neck out straight. So that's really interesting. I did not know that. Gray egrets have black legs and white, let's see, and then blue herons have much lighter legs, so that's another difference. And then as well as the feather patterns. So your cranes are going to be typically on the wider side. Your herons are going to be, grayish, bluish. So yeah, that's an excellent question. I did not know those things, so now I'm well informed. Why do birds have different calls? Okay, so that's a really interesting question too. So there's many reasons for this. One being that they have different mating calls. So if you're trying to find someone that you can fall in love with and have babies, they'll make a certain type of call. Another reason why is that they're trying to scare off anything that's trying to mess with them. So typically you'll find your osprey making these really large noises, kind of like when a lion roars in the morning. Sometimes they're just trying to talk to each other and communicate. I feel like animals can communicate. We as humans don't understand their language, because we just don't know what they're thinking. We don't know what they're saying. So they might just be talking to each other. So there's different types of calls, as well as their throats are going to be developed in different sizes and different shapes. So they're going to have different sounds coming out of their throat. So that's a really excellent question. How do birds bend their wings? So they'll have, so their wings kind of look like this, right? I'm trying to do my best here. And then they have lots of feathers coming out from this way. So they kind of look like that all over the place. So their actual bones and where the muscles are, they won't bend, but all the feathers around them, they can bend as they're flapping. So whenever they're flapping, it kind of makes this motion. I'm really trying my best here to try to explain that answer. But yeah, they have to bend their wings whenever they're flapping their wings to kind of like get air pushing off the ground. So these are really, really good questions. I'm glad that y'all answered these. I try to answer these as best as I can. But it's really good to have an interaction with y'all. Let's check the chat box super quick. I see another one. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Awesome. We have lots of questions here. Do you miss being at camp in person? So I actually was not at camp last year. I got hired in August, so I missed out on camp. I was really, really looking forward to doing camp this year, because everyone talks about it, especially in Ocean Springs, Biloxi area. My wife actually went whenever she was a little kid, so about 15 years ago or something, you know, maybe longer than that. And she actually went to seed camp. So it's been going on for a really, really long time. Let's see. Okay, now let's go back to the question and answer. Is the screen frozen? Am I frozen? I'm not 100% sure.
You're
I
not
hope
frozen
y'all,
on mine, Ron.
I'm not frozen.
No, sir.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so you can see my lips moving and everything. Okay, do all woodpeckers drill holes all around their nest like red nests? So I'm not 100% sure about that. Um, I'm sure woodpeckers just, you know, if they're classified as a woodpecker, then they do drill holes and they're classified in that same category as all woodpeckers. So I'm sure they have the same, you know, thinking methods and the same instincts as the rest of the woodpeckers. So that's an excellent question. Again, I'll look into this. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not really a bird person. I'm learning every day on the job. So I like to hear all these questions. Do you guys have any more questions? If you do, go ahead and type it up. We have just a few more minutes left. If you have any questions in general, anything like that. We do have an 11 o'clock session. So Lacey's gonna show you all a really cool activity so you can get out of your house and, you know, do something. I know most of y'all are tired of staying at home due to the pandemic, but these are all activities that you can do in your backyard or in just areas where there's not going to be a lot of people in your nature side. So make sure to tune in at 11. If you guys don't have any more questions, let's see, let's check the chat box real quick. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to be, let's see. Why do woodpeckers make holes? So that's an excellent question. There's a couple of reasons why. So one, they're trying to get food inside of the trees. Let's see if I can find more answers for that question. They also use it to make nesting sites. And they'll typically have a rhythm to it. So they'll kind of like have a little beat whenever they're making these holes. Usually they'll be in really large trees, so you won't be seeing these woodpeckers making holes in smaller trees, but it'll be for nesting and for eating purposes. So any more questions for me? Awesome. So again, we will be tuning in again at 11 o'clock, and Lacey will be doing a little bit more emphasis on this lesson. If not, we'll see y'all later. You know, some people might be busy then. If not, we'll see you throughout the rest of the week. Make sure to tune in at 9 and 11 every day, so that way we can teach you a little bit more about animals.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who might be new from this morning, my name is Lacey, and I am a marine educator at the Marine Education Center, and I'm going to be teaching this 11 o'clock session. We've got a couple of really fun activities and some really cool things for me to show you today, so I'm really excited about this afternoon. But I have been with the MEC for almost a year. It will be 1 year in August. I have a degree in marine biology from Southern Miss, so I have been a part of Southern Miss for a really long time, and I'm really excited to be able to do this for you guys. And I have somebody helping me today, and I will let him introduce himself.
Good morning, guys. My name is Riley. I'm also one of the other educators at the MEC. Me and Lacey started at the same time, so we've been working together for about a year now. So I'll be behind the scenes, just doing all the poll questions and helping out. So you might hear a voice out in the distance. That's just me. So don't worry about that.
Okay, cool. So to get started this morning, I'm going to teach you guys a little bit, some history with birds that goes along with this first activity. So in the early 1900s, there was a chemical called DDT. That's the initials for it, kind of. It's a very, very long name for a certain kind of chemical that was used to control insect populations. And how they would use this chemical is basically they would just spray it in the air, kind of like you would spray bug spray on your body. People would spray this bug spray into the air. Now, it was sprayed into the air, but it affected the environment really, really harshly. So it had, its good side. It worked. It controlled the insect populations, but it also negatively affected the rest of the environment. And birds were one of those that were hugely affected by this chemical. It affected birds by thinning their eggshells. So we know that when you go to cook an egg, or if you have chickens or some kind of bird around your house, if you've ever seen a bird nest in a tree, that birds lay eggs, and those eggs are going to be covered in a hard shell. Well, DDT would thin those shells and make those shells very, very brittle. So we know that when mother birds will go to incubate or keep their eggs warm, they sit on them. So these egg shells are strong for that reason. They have to be strong so the mother bird can keep them warm, keep them incubated until time for them to hatch. Well, since DDT thinned out these eggshells, whenever the mother bird went to sit and incubate her nest, and all of those eggs would crack and they would break, and you wouldn't have any baby birds that would be hatched. So this affected the bird population. So we had lots and lots of really lots and lots of birds, huge population of birds. And then once DDT was introduced into the environment, that made the number of birds, the amount of birds in the environment, go down. So I have a poll question for you guys. So if you were on this morning, you're familiar with our polls. So Riley, if you can put up the question, why are birds good for the environment or important to the environment? So either they control insect populations, they spread plant seeds, they clean up detritus. So detritus is probably a new word for some of you guys. It just means dead and decaying material. So, a tree that has fallen over, or something dead on the side of the road, we know what vultures' jobs are. We've seen them a lot, or all of the above. So I'll let you guys vote on that, and I'll give you a little bit. All right. So some of you guys voted clean up detritus, and then the majority of you guys voted on all of the above. So those of you who clicked on all of the above, you guys are going to be correct. So birds do all of these really cool things. They control insect populations. So if it was not for birds, we would just be overrun by all of these bugs, spiders, flies, wasps, whatever you can think of. There would be so much more of them without birds. Birds help to spread plant seeds. So when a bird eats maybe a fruit or eats some kind of nut and flies to different locations, sometimes those plant seeds or seeds from that fruit or from that nut will get spread to places, and this helps plants to get a wide range. So that's how we get all these different types of plants and trees in different types of areas. And then clean up detritus. So I mentioned that detritus was dead and decaying material. So If you've ever seen something on the side of the road and a vulture was having a really good meal, that's going to be one of their main jobs. They help clean up all of this dead and decaying material. So birds are very important for all of these reasons. Now, scientists discovered that DDT was harming the bird population because they noticed a smaller number of them, especially with bald eagles and brown pelicans, which both of those we have here on the coast. Now, they discovered that it was harming the environment, and then they banned DDT. And a few years, it always takes a little while longer for populations to bounce back from something like this. So a few years down the road, they noticed that there was an increase in the bird population. So we are going to do an experiment today that resembles the thinning of an eggshell affected by DDT. So this is called the rubber egg experiment if you wanted to Google it after I show you guys how to do it. So if you want to do this along with me, I'm going to list off the things that you need. And if you have these things in your house already, you can go and grab them and do this experiment along with me. So you will need a jar with a lid. So this is just a mason jar lid that just happened to fit on the lid of this jar. You are going to need an egg, a white egg. Last time I used a brown egg. And the differences in the way they feel at the end of this experiment is actually really interesting. And then you will need some white vinegar. So we use white vinegar because it has an acidity. So it's kind of acidic, and it helps to break down the hard shell of this egg. Now, eggshells are actually really strong, so if I were to squeeze it really hard like this, I wouldn't be able to bust it. It's really hard, especially this direction. It's really, really hard to bust eggshells without just dropping them on the floor. So you need all of these things, and this is how you're gonna do it. So you are going to carefully place your egg inside of the jar like this, and then you are going to take your white vinegar, if I can get it open, and you are going to fill up that jar to the very top just so that the egg is completely submerged in the vinegar. So should look like this so far. And you can see all of these little bubbles already surrounding the eggshell. So that means that the vinegar is already doing its job to break down the shell of the egg. So you'll just cap it, put a lid on it, and then you just set it aside. So you can put it in the fridge if you want to. I haven't done that, and I've done this a couple times now. If you just want to put it on your countertop, it'll be just fine there. But when you put your lid on it and set it aside, you're going to wait 2 days. After the end of the first day, you're going to notice that there's going to be a lot of foam at the top of your jar. You're going to want to replace the vinegar at that time. You're going to want to replace it. So pour all the vinegar out, maybe wash your egg off just a little bit, be very, very gentle. And then you're going to want to put new vinegar in the jar and then let it sit for 1 more day. At the end of that 1 more day, that 1 extra day, you are going to pour out all the vinegar, carefully clean off your egg, and then it should look just like this. So you can see that it's really squishy, just like a rubber ball, like a bouncy ball kind of, and you can see through it. So you can see that big yellow yolk right in the middle of it. Now, the vinegar has broken down the shell of this egg and has left only the membrane. So if you have ever cooked with eggs or, fried an egg or made scrambled eggs or baked with eggs, and you went to crack open the shell, but you had to get through this really weird papery part of it before you could get to the actual egg white and egg yolk, this is that part that is left remaining. So it's really, really neat. It's kind of bouncy. I wouldn't recommend slamming it on the ground because it can break. It is just a membrane, but it's a little stronger than you think it is. So you can just lightly bounce it on your table. You can kind of squeeze it and play with it like this. It's really neat. So this represents kind of what happened to those egg shells and the birds that were affected by DDT. Can you please repeat the instructions? Yes. So you're going to take an egg and place it carefully in a glass jar or any kind of jar with a lid. Or if you don't have a jar with a lid, you could use a drinking glass and just put some tin foil over it. And then you're going to pour your vinegar all the way to the top of the jar or the glass so that the vinegar is completely coating the eggshell. So you want the eggshell to not have any contact with the air. So you want it to be completely under the vinegar. And then you are going to set it aside for 1 day. And then after that 1 day, you will notice foam at the top of your jar. So all of these bubbles, it kind of looks like it's doing it right there just a little bit, or it may be a reflection. But you'll notice all these bubbles, all this foam at the top of your jar. So after that first day, you're going to want to pour out the old vinegar, clean off your egg a little bit, and then put new vinegar in your jar with the same egg. And then you're going to leave it for 1 more day, and then you should have a result like this. So I did have to clean off this egg just a little bit. There was some eggshell still left on it, but it wiped off with my finger. I would just like kind of clean it like this. It just busted. I would just clean it off a little bit, and it wouldn't. It would be just fine. Sorry, my cat's playing with her toys. But yeah, so be very careful because it can bust. It just busted in the bowl, thank goodness. But that is how you create a rubber egg. So now we are going to talk about some birding experiments and how we can do that. What does the brown egg look like? It looks exactly like that, but it does leave this really weird brown residue in your jar. So be very, very careful. So now I am going to share my screen, and we are going to talk about some backyard birding. So backyard birding. Let me see here right quick. All right, so Riley, if you would bring up that first poll question for backyard birding. Awesome. How many species of birds are there in North America? So just take your best guess. It doesn't have to be completely right. I didn't even know this. I had to look this up, but I thought it would be something really cool to share with you guys. Awesome. Okay. So some of you voted 130 different species of birds. Some of you voted 1,200, 890, but none of you actually voted on the correct answer, which is 2,059. So there are 2,059 different species of birds that are known to North America. Now this means birds that are typically here year round. They might migrate from north to south, but they don't normally migrate out of the country. So the correct answer is 2,059 birds. So that's a lot of birds if you really think about it. Okay. So birds are super unique animals. Now they are vertebrates, meaning that they have a backbone, and their neck, you know, obviously starts at the very top. It's 5 parts all fused together. So you have the neck, the dorsal / thoracic vertebrae, which means their back. So dorsal means on your back. The synsacrum, which is kind of like where their pelvic bone would be, their hips or their legs would be attached. You have the caudal vertebrae. So caudal means tail. And then you have the feather attachment point. So this is where all of their feathers are going to be attached to. So birds do breathe air, but they have special equipment in their bodies used to breathe air. So they have lungs, like we have lungs to help them breathe air, but they also have something called air sacs. So air sacs are used to pull in as much air as possible to meet their oxygen requirements. So they are very, very active animals. You know, they're always flying around from place to place. They're never still very long. So they need something extra and special to be able to get in all the air and oxygen that they need. So on this picture right here on the top right, you will notice the lungs in this pink little blob right here. And then these two rear air sacs are going to be those air sacs that they use to get extra oxygen into their bodies. And then they have forward air sacs. So lots and lots of organs used to be able to breathe. So the beaks in birds vary based on species. So different types of birds have different types of beaks. I know Riley hit on that a lot during his presentation this morning, and he did a great job of explaining all that. And you guys did a great job of answering his poll question about it. So I know that you guys know all about beaks, and I'm not gonna ask you any questions or anything because I know you guys are very smart and you know all those now. But they are specialized on what they eat. You know, if they eat berries or nuts or fish, all of those types of birds are going to have different types of beaks. So their feathers are also very unique. So birds have at least two types of feathers. They're going to have flight feathers and down feathers. So flight feathers are obviously going to use to help them fly. And then down feathers are going to be used to help keep them warm. So even birds need to stay warm. But feathers are actually believed to have evolved from the scales of dinosaurs. So if you really think about it, birds are actually mini dinosaurs. Scientists are actually thinking that the Tyrannosaurus Rex or the T-Rex was actually covered in feathers. And so there's a really fun connection right there that birds are essentially modern day dinosaurs. But again, feathers are used to keep them insulated, like with these down feathers right here. They're used to keep them dry from rain even, and used for flight. So lots of different purposes and lots of other types of feathers out there. So birds also have something really, really cool, which are called pneumatic bones. So pneumatic just kind of means hollow. So you have this image right here on the bottom left where you can see all of these air pockets or these pieces where there is nothing inside of this bone. So hollow bones or pneumatic bones are what helps a bird to fly. So it makes them very, very lightweight, and it makes it a lot easier for them to fly. So on the screen right here, this is a real life pelican skull. So you can see that where the eyes would go right here. And this is just the top part of the beak. And you can tell it's the top because they have this little curved part at the end right here that they use to preen their feathers with. So just to clean their feathers and make sure everything is where it should be. But if you look super closely, right, if I can get it to focus right there, if you can see me, the background really wants to focus on that. Okay, so right here, there you can see all of these little air pockets, all of these bones and cross sections of bone that makes even the bird's skull hollow. So everything about the bird is going to be lightweight to help it fly. So, why are birds important? So you guys answered a question about that earlier when we talked about the DDT and the eggshells. But birds serve a very important role in their ecosystem, and all bird species serve a very critical role both as prey and predator. So birds will eat lots of different things, and depending on what species of bird it is or what kind of bird it is. So some food items of birds would be insects, smaller fish or large fish if you're a big bird. Even some birds will eat other birds. So owls have been known to eat other very small species of birds like finches. They'll eat snakes. So Riley talked about how birds can help control snake populations. And then obviously they'll eat things like berries, fruits, nuts, things that are not animals. So birds have a wide variety of things that they like to eat. And obviously they have their certain roles. So they're very, very important. And some of those roles would be to balance the populations. So again, with the insects, so if there were no birds, we would just have way more insects in the world than we have now. And then they feed on detritus. So remember, detritus is dead and decaying material. And then they help spread seeds. So I hit on that earlier too in that first poll question, that birds will eat a certain type of fruit or a nut and then fly to one place. And then by that process, we will get all of these plants that have a very wide range. So lots of places where they can grow because birds carry those seeds from one place to another. So we are going to do some backyard birding today. That is the second activity in this lesson today. But first, how do you even identify birds? So you can look at their silhouettes. So if it's an overcast day, like it is at my house right now, or if it's very sunny and it's kind of hard to look right up in the sky, you can identify birds by their silhouettes. So this top picture right here almost looks like the silhouette of some kind of raptor. So a raptor is going to be one of those really important birds. So big birds like ospreys or red-tailed hawks, or even an eagle. So if I had to guess what this top picture was, it would be one of those three. And you can use special equipment. So sometimes birds are far away and you're afraid that you are going to spook it, that it will run away if you don't, or if you get anywhere near it. So you can use things like binoculars, or like I've seen people actually use telescopes to look at birds, to bird watch. So if you have some of those things at home, you can definitely use them to bird watch today. And you can identify them by calls and songs. So even though you may not see a bird, hearing a bird will tell you what it is too. So I have a couple of examples of what these birds might sound like. So we have an osprey. Oops. So that is the call of an osprey, and they're super loud, super high pitched. You can hear them from a hi Beverly. You can hear them from a really long way away, and that was the call of my cat. If you heard that in the background. So I didn't know osprey sounded like that until I moved to the coast, but they are super original sounding to me, and I always love to hear an osprey. And the next thing that you can definitely look out for, especially in Mississippi, since it is our state bird, is going to be the northern mockingbird. Okay, so that is going to be the northern mockingbird. And if you know anything about mockingbirds, you know that they can mimic the sounds of other birds, other animals, even car alarms. So they have been known to mimic the sounds of car alarms. So you never really know when you're hearing a mockingbird. To know you're hearing it, you kind of have to see it. But those are just two really, really good examples of what you could hear today. So you guys are now going, it is 11:30, so you guys are now going to go to your window, go to your front porch, your back porch with an adult, and you are going to bird watch for about 15 minutes. So you guys should have gotten a little kind of field guide from me with pictures of birds, descriptions of them and their names, and then it has a little section for notes. So you can write down where you are, where you saw the bird, what the bird was doing, did it have a nest nearby, was it flying, was it with another bird, everything you can think of. Go ahead and write that down in those notes. And then when we come back in 15 minutes, so at 11:45, you guys are going to chat in the chat box what you saw and what those birds were doing. But first, before you leave, we are going to ask you, what type of birds do you expect to see while bird watching? So you guys go ahead and vote, and we'll see if you actually saw those things when you come back. Awesome. So we have northern mockingbird, the osprey, and the northern cardinal. So cool. So last week, so this is week 2 of camp. When we ran this lesson last week, people voted on those same things and they saw all of those things. So you guys go ahead and go to a window. If it's raining at your house, it just got done raining at my house. So go to a window or your back porch or in your backyard with an adult and bird watch until 11:45, and then come back and we will share what we saw. So we're getting a lot of stuff coming through on the chat. So we want to discuss those and look what we saw from the polls. All right, so all right, Ariana said that she saw 3 or 4 northern mockingbirds and 3 were flying. That's super cool. Mason said, I also saw a sparrow and a chickadee. Another chickadee, heard a woodpecker, hummingbirds, heard more woodpeckers. All right, that's some really, really cool stuff right there. Do you guys have any questions about what we talked about today, either the activities, anything about birds? I've got a couple things in the Q&A. All right. When you meant the holes, did you mean they were all the way through where you looked on one side and could see through the other? No, it was not like that. Just 2 little spots where she got poked by the bird. She was fine though. It didn't end up being as big of a deal as we thought it was. So she healed up really quickly and she's doing just fine now. Again, that was like 3 or 4 years ago. So she's an old lady dog now, but she's doing really good. So why do birds need to eat different food and have different beaks for different things? So lots of birds eat different types of food. So you have birds that are strictly carnivorous. So carnivorous meaning that they only eat meat. So, oh, cool. Here's the result. So lots of people saw northern mockingbirds. One saw a cardinal. And then we've got lots of others. So yeah, you guys keep putting in those other in the chat. But different birds need to eat different foods because their bodies are just made differently. So a itty bitty tiny finch is not going to go after, a big fish because it just doesn't have what it needs to catch fish like that. Now an osprey has what it needs to catch and eat fish. So it has very large talons and it has a very sharp beak to be able to eat a fish. Now they have different beaks because of the different things that they eat. So a beak that is short and stout is very strong for busting open acorns or eating very small berries. And then animals like cranes and herons are going to have those long beaks for fishing as well. So they're really good at being very stealthy and kind of really sneakily grabbing a fish from inside the water. I think of them kind of like chopsticks. So if you have chopsticks, this is actually a really fun game you can play at home. So you can get different things like marbles and pennies and let's say paper clips, and you can put them on the floor And then you can get different utensils such as spoons. So if you got plastic spoons or real spoons, you can get spoons, chopsticks, and let's think of something else. Spoons, chopsticks, or like a net to represent like a pelican's beak. And you can see what kind of tools easily pick up certain types of things. So obviously scooping is going to be really easily done with the spoons, and then picking slender things up are going to be really easy with those chopsticks. So they have different types of beaks based on the different types of stuff that they eat, and they all eat different things because all birds are different. Even though they're all birds, they're all different birds. What kind of nest do sparrows make? I don't know that question. That's a really good question. Something I could look up for you. And if you get on tomorrow, I will have that answer if you just remind me. But I will look that up. I don't know. That's a really good question. All right, let's see if we saw anything else. Saw cardinals and mockingbirds. That's really neat. I found a pileated woodpecker, a blue jay, crow, and a catbird. Some were flying. That's really neat. You know a lot about birds. So yeah, that's super cool stuff. Are we going to do more experiments next time? And then you said you saw the birds on your trampoline. So yeah, at the 11 o'clock, we're always going to do some kind of really fun activity. Tomorrow, Riley's going to show us some really cool stuff. We're always going to do some kind of activity that you guys can do at home. So whether it be an experiment like it was today, or just kind of go outside, look, and come back like we did today as well. So if you guys don't have any more questions or anything else that you saw today, or anything that you just want to say you thought was fun, go ahead and do that. But if not, we'll wait a couple seconds, and if not, we'll say goodbye. All right, it looks like we don't have anything else today. So guys, remember to come back on tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and Riley is going to be going over some reptiles. So if you really like reptiles, if you like turtles, if you like sea turtles, if you like snakes, if you like alligators, then you come back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and you'll get to see and hear about a lot of really cool stuff having to do with reptiles. So I guess we'll see you guys in the morning. Yes.